Welcome to another episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Player Ranks. In this series, we rank various Yu-Gi-Oh! Themes based on your comments and suggestions. Come back every Tier List Tuesday to see an all-new installment of this series. Alright, what's up guys? We are back. We are doing another tier list today. There's a playlist of tier lists available on the channel, so if you want to just watch tier list after tier list after tier list, that's available to you anytime. And also, do you want to make your Master Duel experience a lot better?
Are you ready to take your Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel Play experience to a new level? The Untapped GG Companion is here for you. Use the deck tracker to know exactly what cards you have in your deck, and to go over any cards you aren't familiar with yet by hovering over them. It instantly updates when you draw a card, and automatically hides if you check your extra deck or graveyard. This is the perfect tool to help you master a new deck. The Untapped GG Companion also lets you import decks directly into the game in seconds. Copy any YDK or YDKE deck string, create a new deck in-game, click the Start Auto Import button, and let us take the wheel. Once the duel is over, check your win rate on your personal stats page. Brag among your friends and share your decks so they can import them into the game too. Start your path to master today by downloading the Untapped GG Companion at ygom.untapped.gg.
Alright, so we're back here. Today we're doing Sacred Beast. This is an awesome deck. It's one of my favorite like GX decks ever. It probably is my favorite GX deck ever. I just really enjoy them, and I like what they did with the new support. Uriah was actually one of my first GX decks, whereas I had a pure Uriah deck. I played even on Master Duel not recently, but maybe 6 months ago. I had a 60 card Uriah deck, a bunch of trap monsters, reasoning, 3 reasonings. It was a ton of fun, but honestly I've always loved the Sacred Beast, and they've gotten a lot better over the course of the last few years, because they've dropped actually half decent support, and the deck overall is I would say fairly competitive. It is a very strong rogue deck. So let's do the tier list. So first things first, we got Chaos Summoning Beast. I'd say Chaos Summoning Beast is B tier. B tier and above is basically cards that you have to use in the deck. They're not mandatory, but we just obviously have to have some sort of grading system between how good they are and how not good they are. Chaos Summoning Beast is one of the better cards in the archetype, even though it is only B tier. Basically what it does is you contribute it to special summon any Sacred Beast from your hand, ignoring summoning conditions. And then also has a second effect where you can banish this card from the graveyard and search out Fallen Paradise, which is the field spell, and the field spell is an entire conversation of itself. Overall, it's just a good card, but it is replicatable with other effects. So the new Chaos Summoning Beast, or the new Summoning Beast right here, does similar things to what Chaos Summoning Beast does. And then in terms of it can summon a monster from the hand. It can not only it can search and then summon from hand. This can only summon from hand. Also, the searching the Fallen Paradise. There's already 2 cards in the archetype that do search Fallen Paradise, which is the Opening of the Spirit Gates and also the Dark Beckoning Beast. They both actually do it. So this card is just kind of, I don't want to say it's like a filler card. It's definitely a card you play 100%. You even probably play it at 2 or 3, but generally speaking, it's just a kind of, like I said, it's kind of just like a filler card that you put in there, and it does more of what the archetype already successfully does. Next is the Raphael Shimmering Scraper. I'd say he's probably like a C tier. This is more of like an optional card. Basically what this does is if you have a Raphael face up on your field, you can discard this card, make the Raphael double its attack, and then you can essentially make your Raphael attack all monsters. So it's essentially like a what is this? It's like an honest for Raphaels, which is, I would say, kind of cool. It also recurs itself. You contribute a monster to get it back, and on top of being able to recur itself and attack all it can recur itself, and you can summon this card actually by attributing any 3 monsters on the field. This card's interesting for a lot of different reasons. It does double the attack of Raphael. It can make him attack all monsters. This can definitely be kind of like a finishing move, but the deck, generally speaking, is actually kind of built more around Hamon. Like in general, if you're making like an overall deck, usually it's built around Hamon, and most of the time this card is just kind of like a brick that you can play, but generally a lot of Sacred Beast players, including myself, usually actually cut this card out and don't play any copies at all, just because it only works for Raphael, and like I said, most of the time you're sitting on a Hamon, and it's only really good going second, so I would say C tier is probably fair. Now, these 3 Sacred Beasts are a little bit, I'm going to move them right here, they're a bit complicated to rate, because they're differently rated individually than they are in the archetype. So in the archetype, the best is Hamon. Hamon, in defense mode, redirects attacks to itself. When he destroys a monster by battle, he inflicts 1,000 damage. He has a base stat of 4,000 attack, 4,000 defense, so those are just really, really good stats. Like, a lot of those things about this card are just really good. And then you summon it by attributing 3 continuous spell cards that are face up on your field. That summoning condition doesn't actually matter in the archetype because there's so many ways to cheat it out without ever having to actually have face up continuous spells. If you are playing it on its own, it actually used to be a monster that you could play in Crystal Beast, or you can still play it in Crystal Beast. Yeah, you could tribute the Crystal Beast monsters and summon this card out. That's the way I used to play this card way back in the day with Crystal. It was like the payoff for playing Crystal Beast because they didn't have any boss monsters, any fusions, anything back then, and Rainbow Dragon was kind of worthless and difficult to summon. So this card was actually a better payoff for Crystal Beast than Rainbow Dragon for a lot of years. But on its own, I would say it's kind of like an okay card, but in the archetype, it's probably like an A tier. It's usually the monster that you're going to end on because with Cerulean Skyfire, it's essentially a negate, and it redirects all attacks to itself, which is pretty cool. Next is Ravael. By itself, Ravael is probably like a C tier. There's nothing really that like great about Ravael. He's just kind of okay. Basically, you summon him by tributing 3 fiends on your side of the field. Not particularly difficult to do, not particularly easy. Essentially 3 fiend monsters, you get to summon him. And then he has an effect where when your opponent summons a monster, you can special summon a token to your side of the field. That, I believe, is not even limited. So every time they summon, you get to summon a token, which is actually quite cool. Because next turn, you can swarm the board with link monsters, which can be actually quite nice. It can be kind of like a decent like recursion. That's why you do play a pretty vibrant extra deck in this game, in this archetype. And then lastly, it has an effect where you contribute a monster and this card gains attack equal to the monster. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of like Obelisk the Tormentor. It's like an Obelisk the Tormentor light. But it works with fiends. I would say it's probably like in C tier on its own. In the archetype, you do play it because it is 4,000 attack, 4,000 defense. It does have good base stats, but generally, out of all of the sacred beasts, it's kind of lackluster. And then you've got Uriah, and Uriah is interesting because technically speaking, a lot of people don't even play Uriah in the Sacred Beast deck. So when they're playing like, they're playing like a constructed Sacred Beast deck using all the Sacred Beast support. Usually, like, unless you're playing the fusions, you usually don't play Uriah. But on its own, Uriah is by far the best. Uriah, I would say, if you're building like, let's say you want to build a pure Uriah deck or a pure Hamon deck or a pure Ravael deck, by far the best of the 3 is a pure Uriah deck. This card gains, basically you summon it by tributing 3 continuous trap cards, which has always been a really cool summoning condition because you can essentially summon it the following turn. You can play a ton of floodgates and then just tribute the floodgates and summon this thing out. But basically, yeah, you tribute 3 continuous traps, and then this card gains attack equal to the continuous traps you have in the graveyard times 1,000. So this card can essentially have like 10,000 attack fairly easily, honestly. So I've always liked this card. Also, it has another effect that's very awesome and kind of proactive, unlike the other Sacred Beasts, which is it can destroy a spawn trap card on the field, and neither player can respond in response to that card's activation, which is kind of crazy. Again, it's kind of crazy. They cannot respond. That's a crazy effect to put on a card. I believe in 2006, one of the first cards to have the effect where your opponent cannot respond to your card's activation. It's like a super poly in a certain sense. But yeah, this one's always been, Uriah's always been my favorite, so there's definitely some bias here. Like I said, you can play a 60-card deck with Grasslick Screener, mill a bunch of trap cards, play Reasoning, Monster Gate, stuff like that. Put a bunch of traps in the graveyard. You can play a bunch of trap monsters, play floodgates. You can play so many different floodgates. And then you just tribute the floodgates and special summon this card. You can play every floodgate you can imagine. Goes in match. There can only be one. Skill drain. Everything. You play all of them. And then your opponent passes. They go, I can't beat that. That's just, you have 3 floodgates on the board. And you just, bam, just slam down Uriah, tribute your floodgates. All of a sudden, you've got this 10,000 attack monster. They had nothing in their opening hand to play through the floodgates, and you just attack with this gigantic monster. And if they have any back row, you just destroy it. They can't respond. It was just really, really awesome. I've always personally, I always liked this effect. But if I'm being realistic, in the Sacred Beast deck, Uriah is actually not that playable. The only reason, like I said, that you would even play it is if you're playing the fusions. and that's about it. But as in isolation, it's probably like up here. If you're playing again against all of them, it's the best. But if you're playing it in the context of the deck, it's probably like a C tier. It's optional. It's not something that's guaranteed. Chaos Core is kind of like a weird card. Basically, if this card's targeted by your effect or your opponent's effect, or targeted for by battle, you can send three. You can send 3 copies, one of each of the Uriah, Raphael, and Haman to the graveyard, and then this card gains counters, puts counters on it, and then for every counter it has, it can't be destroyed by battle once. So essentially, when it's about to get destroyed by battle, you can remove a counter. This effect is like so iffy. I'd say this is between D and F tier. I've never like actually used this card in a deck. The only reason you would actually play this is to target it and then put the materials into the graveyard so you set up for the fusion. But honestly, I don't think it's that necessary. Honestly, you can even argue this card's an F tier. Like, I've never used this card. This is one of the newest support cards. It came common inside the structure deck, which is like baffling to see. Like, can you like a common card that's brand new in a structure deck? Usually they make all the new cards like super rares and ultra rares. They put this is a brand new card and they automatically just like, we know it's not good. Like, the only reason, like I said, that you would play this is to set up for the fusion, but this card's just really slow in the archetype, and I wouldn't recommend playing this. Next is Dark Beckoning Beast. This card is between A and S tier. It's the best it's the best monster in the archetype. It's so good, sprites use it. Basically, on normal summon, this allows you to search any card any of the Sacred Beasts, and then any card that lists any of the Sacred Beasts in its text. So it essentially searches the entire archetype on normal summon. On top of that, it has an effect where you get a double normal summon of a fiend monster with 0 attack and 0 defense. So you can summon Chaos Summoning Beast, Dark Summoning Beast. So you'd have to tribute summon this, but you can still summon a Chaos Core if you wanted to, but let's be honest, we're not doing that. But basically, yeah, you have a double normal summon of any fiend monster that is 0 attack, and that also works with that other Phantasm Chaos. I forget what the Chaos card is, but it's a 0 attack monster that you can also summon with this. But basically, it's the searcher of the deck. It's very important. You can normal summon this, and then search the opening of the Spirit Gates, and then you summon Almirage using this card, and then you basically activate the Spirit Gates, and then you can search any of the summoning beasts. So like the new one, the Dark Summoning Beast, you can search the Chaos Summoning Beast. You can search any of them, and you can discard and then pitch whatever you pitch, special summon it back, and then you can essentially go from there. So it's like a very important combo card in the deck. Next is Dark Summoning Beast. This I'd say is probably like B, maybe A tier, but it can be a little bit slow because it can prevent you from attacking. Basically what it does, it's a level 5 monster, but it's fine because you have other ways to special summon it, and you know, you get extra normal summons, so it's okay that it's level 5. But basically what it does is it essentially you contribute this monster, and then you can special summon any of the Sacred Beasts from your deck, ignoring summoning conditions. So that's awesome. But then you can't attack for the rest of the turn. This isn't a problem if you're going first, but going second, it can be a little bit annoying because you're like, you know, you're trying to finish the game off. You're not trying to play forever. And then it has another effect where you can banish this card out of the graveyard, and then you can add any of the Sacred Beasts to your hand. So either it's adding a Sacred Beast or it's special summoning a Sacred Beast, but either way you can use both effects in one turn, and both effects are honestly really good. So I'd say probably B tier, A tier, it's somewhere around here. They're both really good. Chaos Summoning Beast, I might adjust these as the tier list goes on, and I kind of see where everything is down, but either B or A tier is definitely fair for both of these. Chaos Summoning and Dark Beckoning Beast, they're both very good. Next is Dark Summoning Beast. This card hasn't, I'm sorry, this is Phantasm Summoning Beast. So this card hasn't actually come out in the TCG yet. Right now it's an OCG exclusive. I don't know what the name will be when it comes out, so if it's different from what I'm saying, it happens. This card's actually a new card. It's actually really quite strong. I'd say this is another, honestly, I'm probably going to put these guys in B tier. They're just really good. I'd say it's probably somewhere around B tier. Yeah, I'd say it's probably somewhere around B tier. It's a really strong card. Basically what it does, it's a level 7, 0 attack, 0 defense fiend monster, so it works with Dark Beckoning Beast, and it works with the Chaos Gates and stuff like that. But basically what this card does, honestly, I'm going to put the Haman here, and I'm going to put these guys here. Basically what it does is you contribute it And then you can add a Sacred Beast to your hand, and you can special summon that Sacred Beast from your hand, ignoring summoning conditions, essentially. It adds from graveyard or from deck, and then it special summons from the hand. And the one that you add to your hand can be different from the one that you special summon from your hand, which is actually quite good, actually. And then it has a graveyard effect where it can banish itself, and then you can search the archetypal fusion spell for free. So that's actually really cool. And that's something that I like about all of these summoning beasts, is they have their on-field effect to tribute themselves and do something, and then they have a graveyard effect where you can banish them and then get an additional effect. So they essentially all have 2 effects, which is really cool. So yeah, they're just all really awesome. So these 3 are all really good, probably A tier. Next is Fallen Paradise. This card is absolutely like busted. If this was in any other archetype, it would be banned. Basically what this card does is none of the Sacred Beasts can be targeted or destroyed by card effects. That's already crazy. And then once per turn, if you control a Sacred Beast, you can just draw 2 cards. Just draw 2 cards. No questions asked, just draw 2 cards. That is insane. It's essentially Pot of Greed on a field spell, and the field spell is searchable by Dark Beckoning Beast, the Opening of Spirit Gates, and the Chaos Summoning Beast. Like, it's searchable with like a million different cards. It's absolutely, it's incredible. Like, the field spell is so good. It's one of the main reasons to play this archetype. It is one of the most broken field spells that are out there. It's just once per turn, you can just, if you have a Sacred Beast on your field, you can just draw 2 cards. No questions asked. Here you go, draw 2 cards once per turn. It's one of the reasons that you don't play Pot of Prosperity or Pot of Desire or Pot of Extravagance in this deck, because this card exists. Like, why even banish your extra deck when you can just draw 2 for free and it's searchable? Like, it's absolutely crazy. So you play Triple Tactics instead, because this is just a really, really strong card. Next is Phantasm Martyrs. This is between D and F tier. It's another one. I'd say maybe D, maybe F. It's really bad. It's one of the first support cards ever printed. So basically what they released the 3 Sacred Beasts, and then they released this in the same pack. It was Soul of something. I forget the exact Soul of... it was something like SOI. I forget the exact set that this was released in. But it's just not a great card. It's definitely very aged. But in a certain... It's funny because, like, in a certain sense, the card is very aged and bad. But because of new mechanics, it's actually gotten better. But basically what this card does is, if you control one of the Sacred Beasts on your field, you can discard... Send 2 cards, your entire hand to the graveyard. It has to be a minimum of 2 cards, so you have to discard at least 2 cards to the graveyard, and then you can summon 3 tokens to your board. Now, this isn't good, but like at the same time, it's not something that's difficult to pull off, because you will have one of the Sacred Beasts on your side of the field, and you essentially will have extra cards in your hand. Like, it doesn't really matter. Generally, you want to keep hand traps, but I guess you can have 2 cards in your hand. But basically, it summons 3 tokens. If there's ever a time when there's a Link 3 that is really, really, really worth summoning, I would maybe consider playing this. But generally speaking, at best, this will give you like an IP that during your opponent's turn can go into either a Nightmare Unicorn or like or a SP Little Knight, like something like that. At best, they can give you that, but generally speaking, I would rather keep 2 cards in my hand and then not have to search this card, then play this card. So I'd say it's probably in D tier. I think it's better than Chaos Core, but they're both kind of garbage, so don't play either. Cerulean Skyfire is a good card. I'd probably say it's in B tier. The only thing that's kind of like iffy about is that you have to have the Hamon on your side of the field, which again is not difficult, but it's awesome. Like, it's a good card. It's just not as good as some of the other cards up here. Basically what it does is it's a continuous spell where if your opponent activates a spell card, you can change a Hamon you control to defense mode and then negate the activation of that spell card effect. That effect is continuous, meaning that you can actually negate cards that you typically wouldn't be able to negate. So you can negate Super Poly with this card, which is, I mean, that's just crazy. Because again, it doesn't activate, it's continuous. And then on top of that, it changes Hamon to defense mode. And when Hamon is in defense mode, your opponent can only attack Hamon. Which again, that is just really, really, really good. It's just good. Like, I don't know really what to say. It's just an awesome card. And then if one of the Sacred Beasts leaves the field, one of the Sacred Beasts leave the field, you don't take any battle damage for the rest of the turn. So like every effect on there is pretty much good. It's just simply a one of that you play, which is why I'm putting it in B tier. It's a one of, so I wouldn't play more copies than one. Yeah, B tier is totally fair with that card. Next is Opening of the Sacred Beast. This is easily an S tier. easily an S tier. I don't know where to place what in S tier, but it's definitely an S tier. Basically, on activation, it can add any card, any of the Sacred Beasts, or any card that lists any of the Sacred Beasts. So essentially, just like Dark Beckoning Beast, it searches the entire archetype, and it can search Dark Beckoning Beast, and Dark Beckoning Beast can search itself, search the opening gates. Like both of the, it's such a crazy combination there. Both can search each other, and they both search essentially everything. It makes the deck super consistent. And again, even Sprite play this package, because you can normal summon the Dark Beckoning Beast, search the opening gates, and then use the opening gates to search another Dark Beckoning Beast, give yourself an extra normal summon, and then summon the Dark Beckoning Beast, and now you have 2 level 2s, and you can do all of your Sprite plays from there. It's actually like a really, really, really consistent package. It's unbelievable. But yeah, overall, very, very, very strong card. And then it has an additional effect where if you control a level 10 monster, you can add any continuous spell in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! From your graveyard back to your hand, which again is just really, really good. It's just a good generic effect to have on a card. I'll be honest with you, inside of the archetype, that effect doesn't come up that often, but still really, generally very strong. And then it has another effect that I almost forgot for a second there, which is probably its best effect, which it can discard a card from your hand and then target a fiend with 0 attack from your graveyard and special summon it, which again is a really good effect because it can summon back Dark Beckoning Beast, Dark Summoning Beast, Chaos Summoning Beast, and the Phantasmal Summoning Beast. It can summon any of the Summoning Beasts back out, even though if they're level 7, even if they're level 5, even though they're high leveled, it can summon any of them back from the graveyard, so you have access to all of their crazy effects. And even though they're like high levels and typically they would be difficult to engage with and special summon, they're very easy to summon because this card is just, it's free. It just gives you a free special summon of them back. Well, not free, but discard one. And what's cool is if you have one in the graveyard, so like let's say you have Dark Beckoning Beast in the graveyard already, you can discard the, let's say you discard Phantasmal Summoning Beast to the graveyard. Now that it's in the graveyard, you can actually special summon the exact card that you discarded to the graveyard back to your side of the field. Really, really, really good card. Definitely, actually, you know what? This is probably the best card in the archetype. Like, this archetype is almost unplayable without this card. You have to play it at 3. Next is Dimension Fusion Destruction. This is probably a C tier. It's a totally optional card, but there's good and bad to this. So basically what it does is you can banish materials from your hand, field, or graveyard to summon a Phantasm Fusion monster. So one of these guys right here, the Armitile or the other Armitile. But basically you can summon, you can banish things and then special summon it from hand. Like I said, hand, field, or graveyard. The graveyard part is actually kind of cool. And then that monster can be destroyed. You take no battle damage from that monster. Which is good for the Armitile because it has 0 attack during your opponent's turn. And then basically, also, if you control the Sacred Beast when you activate this card, your opponent can't respond in any way to this card. Now, here's my problem with this card. You banish the materials, and there's not a lot of recursion for the banished cards in this archetype. So sometimes you can banish it thinking you have a game-winning play, and then you kind of lose because they out the Armitile, and now you have all of your Sacred Beasts are banished and you have nothing to play with. That can be a little bit tough to, it's tough because the deck essentially is all Sacred Beasts. And this is essentially like a finishing move. So if you banish 1, 2, 3, and you only play, one of each, or maybe you play 2 Hamons and then you play 1 Raphael and 1 Uriah, and you banish these 2 and 1 Hamon, now you have 1 Hamon in your entire deck. What are you supposed to do? You have all of these other monsters, but they literally have 0 attack. You can't do anything with them. And all of the other cards in the archetype rely on them being on the field. So it's kind of like, it's a bit of a frustrating card where it's like the payoff can sometimes be good because you summon this gigantic monster. But at the same time, it can actually be quite bad because... yeah, it can be quite bad because you essentially get rid of all of the stuff that makes your deck work in order to do it. So if you don't finish the game, you essentially lose. I would say it's probably somewhere around C tier. C tier I always call the optional tier. So C tier is definitely where it is because I always say Uriah is optional. I would say Raphael's not optional. Hamon's better than Raphael, but I would say Raphael's not optional. You kind of have to play Hamon and Raphael. But these two are definitely, like, all of the others are kind of optionals. The Fusion in general is just kind of an optional engine. You don't have to play it. You add a couple bricks to your deck, but you do increase technically the ceiling of your deck. So I'd say C tier is probably fair for that. Next is Awakening of the Sacred Beast. This is a card that is between C and B tier. I'd say probably B tier. Just because it depends on how many of them. Again, it just depends on how many of the Sacred Beasts you're playing, how good this card is. I'd say it's probably in B tier. It's not in C tier. It's worse than Cerulean Skyfire. I think Cerulean Skyfire is the best B tier card, and this Awakening is probably like is also a B tier card. Basically, what this card does is for every Sacred Beast that you have on your field with a different name, you gain additional effects. And the effects are all good, but it just requires you to control a lot of Sacred Beasts to make them like really good. And then also has a continuous effect, it has an effect where if you control a level 10 monster, you can add any continuous trap from the graveyard back to your hand. That is actually good in the Uriah deck because it can help you recycle floodgates, which is quite nice. And this deck actually does have some floodgates that are usable in it. You know, there can only be one can actually be usable once you've already set up your board. There can only be one, can be quite good. It's just not very good when you're kind of getting to your board. So when you've got like this little beasts and you're trying to play with them, it can be a little rough to there can only be one because it'll prevent you. Skill Drain can be a little bit rough, but certain cards like these three can actually play under Skill Drain, which is quite nice. And these guys are always like, these two are really good under Skill Drain because essentially if your opponent's board is drained and you have 4,000 attack monsters, you're probably going to win. But also on top of being able to add back or recur a continuous trap, this also has an additional effect, 3 effects, where for every Sacred Beast, it gains an extra effect. So if you control one Sacred Beast, every single time your opponent summons a monster, you gain life points equal to that monster. That is not like a bad effect because it'll essentially elongate the span that the game will last. So even if you get put in a losing position, you can gain a ton of life points and then draw something that will really help you and kind of like take back the game. But on top of that, it can help you win in time if you're playing like if you're playing in the TCG or you're playing in the OCG and you're going to tournaments. It can actually help you win in time because every time your opponent summons, like, you just gain life points. So even if it's like 800 life points, you can win just like that. And then it has a second effect where if you control 2 Sacred Beasts, you gain all of your opponent's monsters are essentially skill drained. And it has a third effect where if you have 3 Sacred Beasts, any monster sent to your opponent's graveyard is banished instead. So basically, this can make you gain life points every single time. It's a one-sided skill drain and a one-sided macrocosmos for every Sacred Beast that you have on your set of field. Generally speaking, if you're playing like a really competitive version of this deck, I would say you're probably going to have like 2 Sacred Beasts on your field. So you're going to have the skill drain effect in effect. Generally, you won't have like all 3, because if you have all 3 on the field, you probably are going to, you're already in a winning position. This card's not going to change much. But generally speaking, you're usually going to, in a first turn, pull off either the first effect or the first 2 effects. So I'd say it's probably somewhere in B tier. Again, it just depends on how many of all of these things that you want to play. And like I said before, in Sacred Beast deck, Uriah is optional, and same thing with the Fusion. They're optional cards. You're not guaranteed to play them, so I'd say it's probably somewhere around B tier. Next is Hyperblaze. I'd say this is probably like another C tier card. I'm going to put it next to Uriah. It's not a bad card by any means, but this is essentially a card that is only really good in a pure Uriah deck. I've never actually seen anybody run this in their Sacred Beast deck, but it is a very good card. If you're running it, if you're running a pure Uriah deck, this is a 3 of, without a doubt. This is like, it'd be a 10 of, honestly, if it could be in a pure Uriah deck. Which is, again, one of my preferred ways. I really like playing pure Uriah. In a pure Uriah deck, this is definitely, without a doubt, a 3 of. So basically what it does is it lets you summon Uriah using face-down trap cards. It allows you to summon Uriah using either face-down trap cards or face-up trap cards. So essentially, Uriah only lets you use face-up continuous trap cards. This will allow you to use face-down, which is kind of cool. Then it has a second effect where if there's an attack and if there's a battle involving a Uriah, you can send a trap card from your hand or from the deck, directly from the deck, a continuous trap card, and then make your Uriah's attack equal to all continuous trap cards on the field and in the graveyard. So Uriah is going to have a ton of attack, which is really good. You essentially can win the duel just off of resolving that one effect, because it can make Uriah just like, you know, like 8,000 attack from one activation. It has another effect where you can discard a card, and then you can add a Uriah from your graveyard to your hand, or you can special summon a Uriah from your graveyard to your side of the field, ignoring summoning conditions. Now, ignoring summoning conditions, you have to be a little careful. What it actually means is, it doesn't mean that you can just send a Uriah with like Foolish Burial and special summon it back. What it actually means is you have to properly summon the Uriah first, and then you can special summon it using this trick. So you can't just, like I said, you can't Foolish Burial and then discard and special summon. That can't happen. Like I said, you have to properly like tribute the 3 trap cards, and then you can bring back Uriah. Otherwise, you can add it to your hand, which is really nice. It's cool actually that this is one of the only ways to recur them from the graveyard other than the Phantasm Summoning Beast. That this guy's fairly new, but up till now, the only way to recur him from the graveyard was actually Hyperblaze was the only way, and it only works with Uriah, unfortunately. But this is a pure Uriah support card. I don't recommend playing this in any kind of a Sacred Beast, like a competitive Sacred Beast deck. If you're playing a Uriah deck, 1000% play 3 of these, but otherwise I'd say it's probably like a C tier card. Generally, if you're playing a Sacred Beast deck, it's like a optional card. All right, Armitile I'd say is another C tier card. It's totally optional, just like the entire Fusion engine in general, just kind of optional. Basically what it does is during your turn it gains 10,000 attack. It's a 0 attack monster. It gains 10,000 attack. It's not a bad card by any means. Like I said, it gains 10,000 attack, so I think that's quite cool. Also, it's a 0 attack fiend monster. If you pay like close attention, it is a 0 attack fiend monster. So I believe you can actually special summon it with the opening of the Spirit Gates by discarding a card. So even if you do banish everything, you can get it back. Also, this card can't be destroyed by battle, even though it has 0 attack, and it only gains 10,000 during your turn. But also, you take no battle damage if you use the in archetype, the Fusion Destruction. If you use the in archetype Fusion spell, this card, you take no battle damage from this card, and it can't be destroyed by battle. Now, if your opponent banishes it, then you essentially lose the duel. Like I said, this is more of a finishing move than anything else. It banishes 3 Sacred Beasts from play, and there's no real way in archetype to get them back as of right now, so that can be a little bit troublesome if your opponent outs this, because then you just have nothing to play. So I'd say it's definitely optional. It is cool to play with the new Phantasm Summoning Beast, but I would say C tier is probably fair for that. Next is the Armitile Phantom of Fury. This I'm going to put next to the Armitile, because if you're playing Armitile, the regular one, you have to essentially play this card. Again, this is kind of like the optional Fusion engine. I actually kind of like this card. It's a little bit of a weird card, I'm not going to lie. But it does help like going second, because it can break pretty much any board in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! If the effects all resolve. But basically what this card does is you can give this card control of this card to your opponent, and then during the end phase, it banishes all cards on the controller's field. Now remember, your opponent controls it. So you banish all cards your opponent controls, including itself. And then if this card is, if that effect resolves, the controller of the card, which is now you, because it goes back to you, it goes to your banish pile, can summon an Armitile, which is this dude right here, ignoring summoning conditions. So you banish this guy, banish your opponent's entire field during the end phase, and then you get this guy out for free, totally for free, who can't be destroyed by battle. And now the turn goes to your opponent's turn. You've got this thing on the field. It can't be destroyed by battle, but if your opponent doesn't out this thing, the following turn is essentially game. Again, this card is a little bit wacky, I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot going on there where you like have to give that to your opponent, and it's a lot to do. But again, it's very, very specific and odd removal, but overall I think it's actually kind of a cool card. Again, it's kind of an optional. C tier is all, I always put C tier as optional. This is all kind of like optional cards that could be cool. But if you're playing, if you're playing this, you have to play this. If you're playing this, you essentially have to play this, and you have to play this. So you're adding a lot of bricks and stuff to your deck. Totally optional. It does raise the ceiling of your deck, as it gives you a 10,000 attack monster anytime. It gives you, banishing your opponent's entire field at any time. Like, it gives you some cool, like, access to some cool stuff, but generally speaking, it can be a little bit bricky to add all of these additional kind of like wacky cards here. Whereas the deck doesn't really lack monster, like, it doesn't lack high level monsters. You've already got Haman. It's 4,000 base. You have Raphael, it's 4,000 base. You have two monsters with 4,000 base stats. They're already really strong monsters. You don't need these like gigantic 10,000 attack monsters to end games. You already kind of have that. So as cool as it is, it can honestly just be a lot better just to play a lot of this other support rather than the fusion stuff. But that is it. That is the entire tier list. The archetype is, despite the fact that it was released in 2006, is fairly new. And most of the cards are fairly new, which is why a lot of the cards are actually like C tier and above, which you don't actually see in a lot of tier lists. Like recently I did a Roy tier list. You didn't see anything like this because a lot of the cards are really old. It's actually kind of incredible. Like, yeah, a lot of the cards are fairly good. Nothing in the archetype is absolutely broken other than Fallen Paradise. And even if they are broken, they are held back by the fact that the monsters can be a little bit breaky. You're playing a bunch of monsters that, truthfully, you can't even summon if you want. Like, come on, usually in the deck, you can't even summon with its own summoning condition. You usually have to cheat it out in some way. So the deck can be a little bit naturally bricky, and it's prone to having to go first and having to set up an established board. It's kind of tough to go second with this deck sometimes. But overall, really fun deck. If you disagree in any way, let me know in the comment section down below, and thank you for watching. La, 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 la.